You are not separated from financial abundance by years of effort, by luck, by education, by connections, or by some distant event that has yet to occur. You are separated from it by one thing alone, the assumption you accept as true about yourself. I tell you, this is one of the greatest truths a person can discover. The world has trained you to believe that money exists outside of you, and that you must somehow chase it, persuade it, earn it through struggle, or wait patiently for it to arrive. Yet what if the very thing you seek is waiting for you to claim it inwardly first? Look closely at your life. Every day, you carry silent assumptions about who you are. You may not speak them aloud, but they move through your mind constantly. Some people assume that money is hard to earn. Others assume that opportunities always pass them by. Some assume that wealth belongs to other people, while they must settle for less. These assumptions feel so natural that they are rarely questioned. They become invisible walls, limiting what a person allows themselves to experience. I have seen individuals work endlessly, believing that more effort alone would change their financial condition. Yet despite all their labor, they remain trapped within the same pattern because the inner assumption never changed. Their actions changed, their plans changed, their circumstances changed, but the image they held of themselves remained exactly the same. They still saw themselves as struggling. They still identified with lack. They still expected disappointment. And so life continued to mirror that expectation. You must understand that an assumption is not merely a thought that passes through your mind. It is a position you occupy in consciousness. It is the lens through which you view yourself and your world. When you assume that you are a person who never has enough, you unconsciously interpret every event through that belief. But when you assume that you are already secure, already provided for, already supported by an unseen abundance, something remarkable begins to happen. Your perception changes, your reactions change, your expectations change, and because your inner world changes, the outer world eventually reflects it. Consider the possibility that the abundance you desire is not something you must create from nothing. Perhaps it already exists as a potential reality waiting for your acceptance. Imagine standing before a door that has never been locked. For years you believed it was sealed shut, and so you never tried to open it. Then one day you discover that all it required was a gentle push. The door was never the obstacle, the belief was. That is how financial abundance often appears. People imagine it is separated from them by countless barriers, when in truth the greatest barrier is the assumption that it is difficult, distant, or unavailable. The moment you begin to accept a different assumption, you begin moving into a different state of consciousness. And when your state changes, life must eventually conform to that change. The distance between where you are and where you wish to be is far smaller than you have been led to believe. In many cases, it is only one assumption wide. Everything comes down to this final truth. The moment you truly accept yourself as the person who already possesses abundance, the creative work is done. I want you to hear that clearly, because many people spend years believing they must continuously force results into existence. They imagine that manifestation is a struggle. They treat it like a battle that must be won through effort, repetition, and constant monitoring. Yet the deeper secret is much simpler. The transformation occurs the moment a new state is genuinely accepted. The difficulty is not in creating abundance. The difficulty is in accepting abundance as part of your identity. Most people continue looking outward for confirmation before they are willing to believe. They say, "When I see more money, I will feel wealthy. When my circumstances improve, I will feel secure. When the opportunity arrives, I will finally relax." Yet this way of thinking places your inner state at the mercy of external conditions. It makes your peace dependent on circumstances. It makes your confidence conditional. But the person who understands the creative power of consciousness reverses the process entirely. They choose the state first. They accept the identity first. They embody the feeling first. Then they allow circumstances to follow. This is why I say that you are one assumption away from financial abundance. Not 1 year away. Not one lucky break away. Not one perfect opportunity away. One assumption away. The moment you genuinely accept a new concept of yourself, everything begins changing. Now, this acceptance is not merely intellectual agreement. It is not repeating words while secretly doubting them. It is not forcing yourself to believe something that feels impossible. Acceptance occurs when a new idea settles so naturally within you that it begins feeling more real than the old story. Think about how your current identity was formed. You were not born believing specific things about money. You learned them. You absorbed them through observation, experience, repetition, and emotional association. Over time, those ideas became familiar. Because they became familiar, they felt true. Many people assume their financial identity is an objective fact when it is actually a collection of assumptions accumulated over years. Perhaps you were taught that wealth belongs only to a select few. Perhaps you learned that money requires endless struggle. Perhaps you witnessed disappointment repeatedly and unconsciously accepted it as normal. Whatever the source, the identity became familiar. And familiarity often disguises itself as truth. Yet what was learned can be replaced. What was accepted can be revised. What became familiar can be exchanged for something greater. This realization is incredibly liberating, because it means you are not imprisoned by your past assumptions. You are free to choose a new state. The moment you begin identifying as someone who is financially supported, abundant, capable and prosperous, you step into a different version of yourself. At first, the change may feel subtle. The outer world may look the same. The bank account may appear unchanged. The circumstances may not immediately reflect your new assumption. Yet inwardly something important has shifted. You are no longer viewing life through the lens of lack. You are no longer defining yourself by temporary appearances. You are no longer waiting for permission to feel abundant. You have accepted abundance as part of your identity. That acceptance is the turning point. Many people underestimate the importance of identity because they focus only on outcomes. They want money. They want opportunities. They want financial freedom. These desires are understandable. Yet every outcome is connected to a state of being. A wealthy life emerges naturally from a wealthy state of consciousness. An abundant experience emerges naturally from an abundant identity. When the identity changes, the results begin moving into alignment. This is why maintaining your assumption matters so deeply. The initial acceptance is powerful, but persistence allows it to become permanent. Imagine learning a new language. At first, every word requires effort. Every sentence feels unfamiliar. Yet with repetition, what once seemed difficult becomes natural. Eventually you no longer translate consciously. The language becomes part of you. A new identity develops in much the same way. The assumption of abundance may feel unfamiliar initially, because you have spent years practicing a different state. Yet each time you return to abundance, you strengthen it. Each time you refuse to identify with fear, you weaken the old pattern. Each time you choose confidence over limitation, you reinforce the new identity. Over time, the assumption stops feeling like a practice. It becomes who you are. And that is the goal. Not temporary inspiration, not occasional optimism, a genuine shift in identity. The world responds differently when you move from a different state. Your decisions change. Your perceptions change. Your reactions change. Your expectations change. You begin noticing possibilities that previously escaped your attention. Ideas emerge naturally. Confidence increases. You become receptive to opportunities that align with your new self-concept. Many people interpret these developments as luck, yet they are simply consequences of a changed state of consciousness. A person who sees themselves as abundant notices opportunities differently than a person who sees themselves as limited. A person who expects support behaves differently than one who expects disappointment. A person who identifies with prosperity thinks, feels, and acts from a completely different foundation. This transformation occurs from the inside outward. That is why I encourage you not to measure your progress solely by visible results. Measure it by the stability of your new assumption. Ask yourself, how quickly do I return to abundance when fear appears? How naturally do I think from the identity of a prosperous person? How often do I feel supported rather than worried? How easily can I maintain faith despite appearances? These questions reveal the depth of the transformation taking place within consciousness. The outer results will come. They always follow the state. But the true victory occurs when abundance becomes your natural point of view. When you no longer need constant evidence. When you no longer panic over temporary appearances. When you no longer define yourself by circumstances. When prosperity feels normal. When abundance feels natural. When wealth feels like an extension of who you are rather than something you must chase. That is when the assumption has taken root. And once it has taken root, the process becomes remarkably simple. You stop forcing. You stop struggling. You stop constantly checking for proof. Instead, you rest in the quiet certainty that what has been accepted within must eventually appear without. This certainty is powerful because it removes desperation. Desperation belongs to the state of lack. Calm confidence belongs to the state of abundance. A person who knows the seed has been planted does not spend every hour digging into the soil. They trust the process. They understand that growth is occurring whether they can see it or not. You must learn to trust your assumption in the same way. Trust the imaginal act. Trust the feeling. Trust the identity you have chosen. Trust the unseen movements already taking place. Remain faithful even when appearances attempt to persuade you otherwise. Remain loyal even when doubt whispers old stories. Remain committed even when results seem delayed. For every time you return to your assumption, you strengthen it. Every time you strengthen it, you deepen it. Every time you deepen it, you bring it closer to expression. And eventually, what once existed only within consciousness stands before you as physical fact. At that moment, the truth becomes unmistakable. You realize that abundance was never waiting somewhere outside of you. It was waiting for your acceptance. It was waiting for a new assumption. It was waiting for a new identity. And the moment you truly accepted yourself as the person who already possessed abundance, the change had already begun. The rest was simply the world catching up to what you had already become. Everything you experience in the outer world is connected to a state of consciousness that you have accepted within yourself. This truth is difficult for many people to embrace because it seems far easier to point to circumstances, other people, economic conditions, or past events as the cause of their financial struggles. Yet I tell you that the outer world is not the author of your life. It is the mirror. A mirror can only reflect what stands before it. It cannot create an image of its own. When a person looks into a mirror and dislikes the reflection, they do not attempt to polish the glass in hopes of changing the image. They understand that the reflection changes only when the person standing before the mirror changes. Yet this is precisely what most people do with their financial lives. They spend years trying to rearrange reflections. They struggle against appearances. They fight circumstances. They become frustrated with results. All the while, the state of consciousness that produced those results remains untouched. I want you to think carefully about this. Every day, countless thoughts pass through your mind, but not every thought becomes a reality. What shapes your life is not an occasional thought. It is the state you consistently return to. It is the feeling of who you believe yourself to be. It is the identity you wear so naturally that you hardly notice it. A person may say they want wealth, yet secretly feel poor. They may repeat words of prosperity, yet inwardly expect disappointment. They may dream of abundance, yet emotionally identify with lack. In such a case, which condition do you suppose consciousness accepts as true? It is not the words spoken for a few moments during the day. It is the deeper feeling that occupies the heart most of the time. Many people unknowingly live in a state of financial fear. They wake up wondering whether there will be enough. They check their accounts with anxiety. They think about bills with tension. They anticipate problems before they occur. They rehearse worst-case scenarios. Then they wonder why life continues presenting situations that match those expectations. The answer is simple. Consciousness faithfully expresses the state that is most consistently occupied. This does not mean you should blame yourself for every unwanted condition. Blame serves no purpose. Guilt serves no purpose. What matters is understanding your creative power. The moment you recognize that your state influences your experience, you are no longer a victim of circumstances. You become a participant in their transformation. I have seen people remain trapped in limitation because they became hypnotized by appearances. They looked at their bank account and concluded that it defined them. They looked at debt and assumed it represented their future. They looked at temporary setbacks and accepted them as permanent truths. Yet appearances are not causes. They are effects. They are the visible result of invisible assumptions that have been entertained over time. Suppose a gardener discovers weeds throughout a field. He could spend every day cutting the visible weeds from the surface. But if the roots remain untouched, the weeds will continue returning. Eventually, he realizes that lasting change requires attention beneath the surface. The same principle applies to financial abundance. If you wish to change what appears in your world, you must become interested in the roots rather than the weeds. The root is consciousness. The root is identity. The root is the feeling of being the person you believe yourself to be. Ask yourself honestly, who am I when I think about money? Do I feel secure or fearful? Do I feel supported or abandoned? Do I feel capable or limited? Do I feel wealthy in consciousness or dependent on conditions for my peace of mind? These questions matter because they reveal the state from which you are living. A wealthy state of consciousness is not measured by the amount of money currently visible in your life. It is measured by the feeling of certainty within you. There are individuals with large fortunes who still live in fear because they occupy a state of scarcity. At the same time, there are people whose external circumstances have not yet changed, yet inwardly they feel rich, supported, and confident. Often those are the individuals whose outer world soon begins to transform. You must learn to separate appearances from identity. Your current financial condition may describe a temporary circumstance, but it does not define who you are. The moment you treat a temporary circumstance as your identity, you give it power over your future. Instead, claim a higher concept of yourself. See yourself as a person for whom abundance is natural. Feel yourself to be someone who is always provided for. Accept inwardly that life supports your prosperity. At first, the outer world may appear unchanged. This is where many people lose faith. They return to old assumptions because the reflection has not yet caught up with the change made within. But remember the mirror. The reflection always follows the object. It never leads it. If you change the image in consciousness and remain faithful to it, the outer world must eventually reflect that change. The secret is not found in forcing events, controlling outcomes, or worrying about how wealth will arrive. The secret is becoming aware of the state you occupy and deliberately choosing a new one. Once you understand this, you stop treating circumstances as masters and begin seeing them as echoes. You stop asking the world for permission to feel abundant. You feel abundant first. Then something beautiful begins to happen. Your reactions change. Your expectations change. Opportunities that once seemed invisible become obvious. Ideas emerge. Confidence grows. Doors begin opening through channels you could never have predicted. What seemed impossible starts feeling natural because you are no longer living from the state of lack. You are living from the state of abundance. And when the state changes, the reflection cannot remain the same. Most people never realize that they are spending their days defending the very limitations they wish to escape. They speak of wanting wealth, freedom, and financial abundance, yet their inner conversations quietly argue for the opposite. They wake each morning hoping for change, while mentally rehearsing the same stories that have kept them where they are. They tell themselves that money is difficult to obtain. They remind themselves of past disappointments. They imagine future obstacles before they even appear. Then they wonder why life continues presenting the same experiences. I tell you that your inner conversations are not harmless mental chatter. They are creative acts. Every conversation you have within yourself is shaping the state of consciousness you occupy. Long before events appear in the visible world, they are rehearsed in the unseen theater of the mind. Most people pay close attention to the words they speak aloud, yet they ignore the words they whisper to themselves all day long. Those silent conversations reveal what they truly believe. Listen carefully to the voice that speaks within you when no one else is around. What does it say about money? What does it say about your future? What does it say about your worthiness to receive abundance? For many people, that voice has become so familiar that they no longer question it. It says things like, I never have enough. Money leaves as quickly as it comes. Wealth belongs to other people. I always struggle. Nothing ever changes for me. These statements may seem small, but repeated often enough, they become assumptions. An assumption accepted as true begins to shape the entire structure of a person's experience. What begins as a thought becomes a belief. What becomes a belief develops into an expectation. What becomes an expectation eventually appears as a circumstance. That is why two people can face similar situations and experience completely different outcomes. The difference is often not found in their education, background, or resources. The difference is found in the assumptions they carry about themselves. One individual enters life believing that opportunities are everywhere. Another believes opportunities are scarce. One expects support. Another expects rejection. One anticipates success. Another anticipates disappointment. Without realizing it, each person is preparing a path that aligns with their assumptions. The world responds not merely to what you want, but to what you consistently believe yourself to be. This is why so many people remain trapped in financial limitation, despite possessing talent, intelligence, and desire. They have not changed the identity from which they are living. They want the results of abundance, without accepting the consciousness of abundance. They seek wealth while continuing to identify as someone who lacks it. You must understand something profound. Your identity is not formed by your current circumstances. Your identity is formed by what you repeatedly accept as true about yourself. If you continue to identify as a person who struggles financially, your mind will interpret every event through that lens. Even opportunities may appear as risks. Even progress may feel temporary. Even success may create anxiety, because it conflicts with the identity you secretly hold. Have you ever noticed how some people receive a financial opportunity and immediately expect it to fail? Others receive the same opportunity and confidently expect it to succeed. The outer event may be identical, yet the inner interpretation is entirely different. This difference arises from identity. The person who sees themselves as fortunate naturally expects favorable outcomes. The person who sees themselves as unlucky naturally anticipates problems. Neither may realize they are doing this. Yet their assumptions quietly influence perception, decision making, and behavior. The world you experience is deeply connected to the person you believe yourself to be. This is why I urge you not to focus solely on acquiring money. Focus on becoming the person for whom abundance feels natural. There is a tremendous difference between these approaches. One chases a result, the other changes identity. Most people spend years chasing results. They believe that if enough money arrives, they will finally feel secure. Yet security does not come from money alone. Security is a state of consciousness. Without that state, even great wealth can feel fragile. Consider the wealthy individual who constantly fears losing everything. Despite possessing financial resources, they continue living in a state of scarcity. Contrast this with someone who possesses unwavering confidence that life supports them. even before wealth fully appears. They move through the world with calm certainty. Their state is already aligned with abundance. The challenge, then, is not merely to think positive thoughts. The challenge is to become aware of the identity you are carrying every day. Notice the stories you repeat about yourself. Notice the assumptions hidden beneath your words. Notice the emotional reactions that arise whenever money is mentioned. These reactions often reveal beliefs that have been operating unnoticed for years. Many people unknowingly cling to old identities because they have become comfortable. The identity may create suffering, but it is familiar. Familiarity can feel safer than change. This is why some individuals resist abundance without realizing it. Wealth requires them to release an old story about who they are. Perhaps they learned in childhood that money is difficult. Perhaps they watched others struggle and accepted struggle as normal. Perhaps they experienced setbacks and unconsciously built an identity around disappointment. Whatever the cause, the old identity remains active until it is deliberately replaced. You cannot consistently experience the life of a wealthy person while remaining psychologically committed to the identity of someone who lacks. This does not mean pretending. It does not mean denying current circumstances. It means accepting a new concept of yourself as the deeper truth. Begin asking yourself different questions. Instead of asking, "Why is money so difficult?" ask, "How would I think if abundance were already normal for me?" Instead of asking, "What if things go wrong?" ask, "What if everything is unfolding in my favor?" Instead of identifying with lack, begin identifying with possibility. The transformation begins within. Imagine for a moment that you already viewed yourself as financially secure. How would you walk? How would you make decisions? How would you react to temporary setbacks? How would you speak about your future? You would not become careless. You would become confident. You would not panic over every appearance. You would trust your ability to create, receive, and sustain abundance. That confidence comes from identity. An identity rooted in abundance does not depend on constant proof. It does not require daily validation from external conditions. It exists first within consciousness. Then life gradually reflects it. This is where many people abandon the process too soon. They adopt a new assumption for a few days, then return to old thinking the moment circumstances appear unchanged. Yet every meaningful transformation requires persistence. A new identity must be nourished until it feels natural. The old assumptions may attempt to return. Doubts may arise. Fear may whisper familiar stories. But you are not required to agree with them. You are free to choose again. You are free to return to the assumption that supports the life you desire. Each time you choose abundance over limitation, confidence over fear, and possibility over doubt, you strengthen the new identity. Eventually it becomes more natural than the old one. Then something remarkable occurs. The struggle to become wealthy begins to fade because you no longer feel separate from abundance. You stop chasing it as something distant. You stop viewing it as a reward reserved for others. You begin seeing it as a natural expression of who you are. And once that shift occurs within consciousness, the outer world begins reorganizing itself around the identity you have accepted. Opportunities appear differently. Decisions become clearer. Actions become more effective. The bridge between desire and fulfillment begins forming beneath your feet. All because you stopped arguing for your limitations and started accepting a greater truth about yourself. The day you cease defending the identity of lack is the day abundance finds room to enter your life. Now let me show you the method. Not a complicated method. Not something that requires years of study or endless techniques. The truth is far simpler than most people imagine. Financial abundance begins to move toward you the moment you begin living inwardly from the feeling that your desire is already fulfilled. People often ask how they should create wealth. They ask what words they should repeat, what rituals they should perform, what special secret they might be missing. Yet the power has never been hidden. The challenge is not finding the power. The challenge is using it consistently. The creative force within you responds to what feels real. It responds to what you accept as true. Therefore, if you wish to experience abundance, you must first learn how to feel abundant before the evidence appears. This is where many people become confused. They believe they must wait for money to arrive before they can feel secure. They think they must wait for success before they can feel confident. They imagine that peace, certainty, and gratitude are rewards that come after the manifestation. Yet the order is reversed. The feeling comes first. The experience follows. Consider a simple example. Imagine someone receives wonderful news. Before anything changes physically, an emotional shift occurs. Their posture changes. Their breathing changes. Their expectations change. They begin responding to life differently because something within them has already moved. The outer world may not yet reflect the news fully, but inwardly they are already living from a new reality. This is precisely what you must learn to do deliberately. I am not asking you to force emotions. I am not asking you to pretend. I am asking you to enter imagination and experience the reality you desire so vividly that it produces the natural feeling of fulfillment. Imagination is not fantasy. It is not daydreaming for entertainment. It is the workshop in which future experiences are formed. Every achievement, every creation, every transformation begins first as an imaginal act. Long before something becomes visible, it exists as a possibility accepted within consciousness. When you imagine yourself financially abundant, do not merely observe the scene from a distance. Enter it. Participate in it. Feel it. Make it alive. Suppose your desire is financial freedom. Do not imagine piles of money without meaning. Instead, ask yourself how you would feel if financial freedom were already a fact. Perhaps you would feel relaxed. Perhaps you would feel relieved. Perhaps you would feel secure, confident, generous, and calm. These feelings are the true treasure. The money is simply one of the ways those feelings become expressed. Sit quietly and create a short scene that would naturally occur if your desire were already fulfilled. Keep it simple. Complexity is unnecessary. Imagine a trusted friend congratulating you on your financial success. Imagine yourself checking an account and feeling complete peace. Imagine paying for something effortlessly and feeling gratitude. Whatever scene you choose, let it imply fulfillment rather than desire. Then bring all your attention into that experience. Hear the words, feel the atmosphere, notice the details. Allow yourself to become emotionally involved. The goal is not to watch the scene. The goal is to inhabit it. Many people imagine for a few moments and then immediately return to worry. They plant a seed and dig it up repeatedly to see whether it is growing. Such a process produces frustration because consciousness receives mixed messages. One moment they are imagining abundance. The next moment they are affirming lack through fear and doubt. You must learn to remain loyal to the feeling of fulfillment. This does not mean ignoring responsibilities. It does not mean refusing to acknowledge temporary circumstances. It simply means refusing to give circumstances the authority to define your state. When appearances contradict your desire, return inwardly to the feeling you have chosen. When doubt arises, return to the feeling. When fear attempts to persuade you that nothing is changing, return to the feeling. The feeling is the anchor. Most people underestimate the importance of feeling because they have been taught that thoughts alone create results. Thoughts matter, but thoughts gain power when they are united with feeling. Feeling impresses consciousness. Feeling gives life to the image. Feeling transforms a possibility into an accepted reality. You can repeat words all day without conviction and produce little change. Yet one deeply felt assumption can transform an entire life. That is why I encourage you not to focus on mechanical repetition. Focus on emotional acceptance. Ask yourself each day, what would it feel like if abundance were already true for me? Not tomorrow, not next year now. Then allow yourself to experience that feeling. At first, it may seem unfamiliar. This is natural. You are stepping into a new state of consciousness. Every new state feels unusual until it becomes familiar. The key is persistence. The more often you return to the feeling of fulfilled abundance, the more natural it becomes. What once felt imaginary begins to feel real. What once felt distant begins to feel present. Eventually, you stop visiting the state occasionally and begin living from it consistently. One of the most powerful times to practice this is before sleep. The moments before sleep are unique because the conscious mind becomes quieter. Resistance weakens. Impressions sink more deeply into consciousness. This is why I encourage you to use the final moments of your day wisely. Do not fall asleep rehearsing financial worries. Do not fall asleep imagining problems. Do not carry anxiety into the night. Instead, enter your chosen scene. Feel yourself already secure. Feel yourself already supported. Feel yourself already prosperous. Allow the mood of fulfillment to accompany you into sleep. Night after night, return to the same assumption. Let it become familiar. Let it become comfortable. Let it become your new normal. Many people wonder how long this process takes. The answer varies because the timing is not the most important factor. What matters is the acceptance of the state. Once a state is genuinely occupied, life begins arranging itself accordingly. Often the change begins subtly. Your thoughts shift, your confidence grows. Opportunities appear unexpectedly, new ideas emerge, coincidences increase, helpful connections form, doors open through channels you could never have predicted. The mind calls these coincidences. Consciousness recognizes them as natural consequences. The bridge between your current circumstances and your desired reality begins forming the moment you accept the feeling of fulfillment as true. You do not need to know how every step will unfold. You do not need to force outcomes. You do not need to control every detail. Your responsibility is simpler than that. Imagine clearly, feel deeply, accept completely, then remain faithful to the state you have chosen. For the person who learns to assume the feeling of financial abundance and carries that feeling into imagination, waking life, and sleep, the transformation becomes only a matter of time. The outer world eventually mirrors what has already been accepted within. And when that reflection appears, it will seem almost natural, as though life had no choice but to conform to the reality you first embraced in consciousness. There will come a moment, after you have chosen your new assumption, when the outer world appears to challenge everything you have accepted within. This moment surprises many people, because they expect that once they begin imagining abundance, life should immediately present evidence that confirms it. Yet I tell you that the true test is not whether circumstances change instantly. The true test is whether you remain faithful to your assumption when circumstances appear unchanged. Anyone can feel confident when results are visible. Anyone can believe when evidence is present. But creative faith reveals itself when appearances offer no support. This is where many abandon the very state that would have transformed their lives. They look for proof too quickly. They measure every day. They search for signs. They watch circumstances constantly, hoping to see movement. When nothing obvious appears, doubt returns, and with doubt comes the temptation to return to old assumptions. You must understand that the visible world moves according to its own sequence of events. The assumption is accepted first within consciousness. Then life begins arranging the necessary conditions through which that assumption can express itself. The interval between these 2 points often causes people to lose confidence because they mistake delay for failure. A seed does not become a tree the moment it enters the soil. Yet no sensible gardener would dig it up every morning to check whether growth has begun. The gardener understands that unseen activity occurs beneath the surface before visible results emerge. The same principle applies to consciousness. The moment you genuinely accept abundance within yourself, something begins moving. Whether you can see it immediately is irrelevant. The movement has already started. Most people have been conditioned to trust only what their senses report. If they cannot see evidence, they assume nothing is happening. Yet many of the most important processes in life occur invisibly long before they become visible. A child grows unseen within the womb. Roots develop beneath the earth before branches appear above it. Ideas form quietly within the mind before they become creations in the world. Financial abundance follows the same pattern. The moment you accept yourself as a wealthy, supported, and prosperous person, consciousness begins organizing circumstances around that assumption. You may not know how. You may not know when. You may not know through whom. But these questions are not your responsibility. One of the greatest mistakes people make is attempting to dictate the path through which their desire must arrive. They become attached to specific methods, specific opportunities, specific individuals, or specific timelines. Then when life chooses a different road, they become discouraged. You must leave room for possibilities greater than your current understanding. The conscious mind sees only fragments. It sees a small portion of reality and assumes it understands the whole picture. Yet life possesses countless channels through which abundance can appear. Opportunities can emerge from unexpected conversations. New ideas can arrive suddenly. Connections can form without planning. Doors can open in places you never thought to look. If you insist on knowing exactly how everything must happen, you limit the very power you are attempting to activate. Trust does not mean passivity. Trust means remaining loyal to the assumption while allowing life to reveal the path. This brings us to something many people call coincidence. I prefer to think of it differently. When your assumption begins expressing itself, life often arranges a sequence of events that appear ordinary when viewed individually. Yet when viewed together, they form a remarkable pattern leading directly toward your desired outcome. This sequence is sometimes called a bridge of incidents. A bridge of incidents is simply the natural chain of events through which your assumption becomes fact. What makes it fascinating is that you often cannot recognize the bridge while you are standing on it. Imagine wishing for financial abundance. A few days later, an unexpected conversation occurs. At first, it seems insignificant. Then that conversation leads to an idea. The idea leads to a new opportunity. The opportunity introduces you to someone. That connection opens another door. Eventually, you arrive at the result you desired. Looking backward, the path appears obvious. Looking forward, it was invisible. This is why patience and faith are essential. Many people interrupt their own bridge because they become discouraged by early appearances. They assume that because the final result has not yet arrived, nothing is happening. They fail to realize that the bridge is already forming beneath their feet. I have seen people reject opportunities because they did not resemble the outcome they expected. They wanted abundance to arrive in one particular way, so they ignored the very events leading toward its fulfillment. They judged the beginning of the bridge before seeing where it led. Remain open. Remain receptive. Remain faithful. Life rarely unfolds according to the rigid expectations of the rational mind. There may even be moments when circumstances appear to move in the opposite direction. This often causes fear. Yet what seems negative today may reveal itself tomorrow as a necessary part of the bridge. A door closes, creating space for a better one to open. A setback redirects attention toward a greater opportunity. A delay provides time for unseen pieces to align. Because the future is hidden, you cannot always evaluate events accurately in the moment they occur. Therefore, avoid assigning permanent meaning to temporary appearances. Instead, return to your chosen state. Feel the abundance. Feel the security. Feel the confidence. Feel the certainty that your assumption is already accepted. This practice strengthens your faith. Faith is not blind hope. Faith is loyalty to an unseen reality that has already been accepted within consciousness. Faith does not require constant proof. It does not depend on immediate results. It rests in the conviction that what has been assumed inwardly is already moving toward expression. Doubt, on the other hand, attempts to persuade you that appearances are more powerful than consciousness. Doubt says, look at the evidence. Faith says, the evidence is still catching up. Whenever doubt appears, Remember that circumstances are effects, not causes. They reflect previous assumptions. If you continue giving your attention to old evidence, you remain emotionally connected to the old state. If you return instead to the feeling of abundance, you strengthen the new state. The choice must be made repeatedly, not once, not twice, but as often as necessary. Each time you choose faith over doubt, you reinforce the identity of the person you wish to become. Each time you return to abundance instead of fear, you deepen your assumption. Each time you trust the unseen movement of life rather than temporary appearances, you strengthen the bridge already forming before you. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The assumption that once required effort begins feeling natural. The confidence that once felt fragile becomes stable. The abundance that once existed only in imagination begins appearing in physical reality. At that point, many people look back and realize that life had been arranging events all along. What seemed like random occurrences were actually connected. What seemed like delays were preparation. What seemed like obstacles were often redirections. The bridge had been there from the beginning. They simply could not see it while they were crossing it. So if circumstances today appear unchanged, do not be discouraged. If evidence seems absent, do not abandon your assumption. If doubt whispers that nothing is happening, remember that some of the most powerful movements in life occur beyond the reach of the senses. Remain faithful. Remain persistent. Remain loyal to the feeling of fulfilled abundance. For the bridge of incidents is already forming, even when invisible, and every step is quietly carrying you toward the reality you first accepted within yourself.